We're starting a new chapter now, and we're going to take a look at how we draw accurately in your AutoCAD drawings. So for that reason, we've got a new drawing for you. You can download it from the library. It's called drawingaccurately.dwg. When you open up the file and go into the Model tab, you will notice that the drawing is blank, but you can see a grid on the screen. If you can't see that grid on the screen, it's this little icon here on the status bar. See, the grid's on and the grid's off, like that. And also in the Layers panel on the Home tab on the ribbon, just go to the drop down and click on the word Objects to make Objects the current drafting layer. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at Grid and Snap for drawing accurately first. Now, this doesn't get used often in AutoCAD, but it's quite a useful tool if you've got a lot of regular shapes that you need to draw. Now we're going to go down to the status bar and make sure that some settings are on and some settings are off. So notice the grid is on. So that's this one that looks a bit like a little piece of breakfast cereal kind of idea. Can you see that there? So the grid is on. Now we also need to switch this one on, snap. So click there like so. Now you'll notice there's an arrow next to snap there as well. So you can use polar snap or you can use grid snap. Make sure it is set to grid snap. We can right click either over grid or snap here, doesn't matter which one. Right click and go to the settings option. And that will open up the dialog box called drafting settings. And you are now in the snap and grid tab of the drafting settings dialog box. Now you want to make sure that all of the settings look as they do on the screen right now. So snap should be ticked, grid should be ticked. Snap X and Y spacing should be set to 50. Grid X and Y should be set to 50. And there should be a major line every 5. Make sure that grid snap is on with rectangular snap. And you can ignore the grid behavior. Just make sure that those two are ticked. And then everything will work fine. Notice you can specify equal X and Y spacing for the snaps. So if you put X in, obviously, Y will be 50, if you see what I mean. X is 50, Y is 50. You can just tab between all these input boxes in the dialog box. So when I click on OK now, that means that my snap and my grid are set to spacings of 50. So I've got a 50 spacing there. Now, before we do anything else, make sure that dynamic input stays on. But this one here, polar tracking, we can turn that off. And we'll turn off our object snap tracking and our object snap. So we don't need them because we will be snapping to the grid instead. This is that grid that you can see on the screen at the moment. So we're just going to draw a simple rectangle using 4 line segments. So we're going to go to the Home tab on the ribbon, Draw panel, click on the line command and come into the drawing area. As you move, can you see it's kind of bouncing around? So each grid square is actually 50, but as you zoom in, watch what happens. Can you see there's a spacing like so? So can you see that? It gets bigger and bigger as you go around like that. Now if I click there on one point and move along, can you see that's 50, 50, 50, 50, 50. So that's the grid. So make sure you zoom in to see the grid. So if I move along 5 squares, 50 times 5 is 250. I left click to finish the line segment, and there's my line 250 long. If I now come upwards, can you see 3 squares is 150? The dynamic input I've left on deliberately so you can see the values of the lengths of the lines. And then I come back here like so. I don't have to go back to that first point. I can right click and using the contextual shortcut menu, close back to the point where I started. So there's my 250 by 150 rectangle using the grid and snap settings. That's how quick and easy it is. And you can do anything with that. You might be drawing teeth, let's say, on a bearing or something like that. So I go back to the line command and I could potentially do this. So as I come along, I can use a diagonal as well. And there's my teeth, let's say on a gear or a bearing, like so. And when I get to that point, I'll just press enter to finish. There we go. There's some teeth on, let's say, a worm gear or something like that. Now, obviously, this is a fairly basic method of drafting, and it can create some basic shapes. Another typical one might be you've got flowcharts to draw. Really useful if you use those regular shapes on the grid and snap to the grid to draw your flowchart symbols. Now, there's a lot of ways and means of working with this, but you can use circles and arcs as well. So if I go to a circle command, let's do center radius. If I pick that intersection of the grids there and come out, as I come out, can you see each grid square is making the radius bigger? It's very, very simple. It's a very useful tool for what I call regular drafting shapes, and I've used it for countless flowcharts in my career to date. So that's snap and grid, using the tools in AutoCAD to make sure that you snap to that grid and draw those regular shapes.